everyone, I'm here with Mr. Milo, and I finally got some news on like the treatment protocol and kind of like what our plan is going to be for him moving forward with his diagnosis. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and also just post about it on YouTube for people who might not have listened to the podcast or seen my post on Facebook or Instagram. So for people who haven't known what's going on with him yet, basically since that trail ride back in the end of 2020 in October, the bad one, you can look it up on my YouTube, there's some video from it, but since then he's just kind of had some problems on and off. He wants me to scratch his butt. And initially, like, the big thing was ulcers. Like, he wasn't really displaying lameness necessarily, he just didn't want to go forward under saddle. So he got treated for ulcers with GastroGuard, and then we reevaluated after the ulcer treatment, and he was still a little off on this right hind stifle, which isn't necessarily abnormal for him because he does have a locking stifle on that leg, and it's something that has been kind of an on and off problem since he was young. Like, it used to fully lock when he was young, which is how we discovered it, and it's not really locked since then. But he does get stiff on it and looks a little off on it after time off, but usually he comes back sound to normal once you exercise it and strengthen it. So what we did then is we did PRP injection, which is ProStride is like the brand name of that, into the stifle, and then started rehabbing him as we typically would for his locking stifle, and it worked well initially, and then we were going through the whole process of like his barefoot transition and whatnot, and I got really busy in 2021, so we did some of his rehab, and then I turned him out on pasture for a lot of the summer to keep Banksy company, and so that I could work. And then he came back into work in the fall and was looking really good, and he was good and sound out on pasture, and that was all good. And we did a little bit of light riding in the fall, nothing major, and then he had the winter off due to all the flooding we had and just lack of time on my part, and now that we're in the new year, he's been having some more issues, and he hasn't been coming back sound like we thought he would have. And at this point we've done like tons of different diagnostics. He's had like multiple lameness exams, he's had his blood drawn, he's had ultrasounds, x-rays of basically every joint in his body, not even just the problem ones. So we've kind of exhausted our treatment options at this point, and there's no signs in his imaging really that tell us what's going on or what's making him feel sore. So at this point, the plan is to go and get an MRI for that right front, which has been his problem foot this whole way along, and the most difficult one to deal with for the transition to barefoot in terms of the angles on it and how it's like he has a high-low, so the right front is his low heel, and it's also the leg that several years back he had a collateral ligament injury on, but it was a very minor one, like a micro tear, and he rehabbed that well and then came back sound for several years since then, and it's not showing up in the imaging like it did before, so it doesn't really display itself as a re-injury of that particular thing, or if it is, it's in a part that we cannot image. So the next step is to MRI it, and for those of you who haven't had to MRI a horse and don't know what it costs, it is very expensive, but we literally have no other diagnostic options, and I do want to know what's going on with him so we can make him as comfortable as possible. So we're starting with the MRI for the hoof, the front right hoof, and then for the stifle, the only thing that came up in imaging for that was that when we compared the ultrasound of his right stifle to the left, he had more fluid around the meniscus by quite a bit on the right stifle, which is abnormal, so we need to look further into that, and unfortunately the stifle joint can be hard to image fully, and the imaging we did do didn't capture whatever the actual issue was other than the fluid in the joint. So the option for that is an arthroscopy, which is first of all diagnostic, and secondly if they find something that needs repair or needs like cleaning up, if he's got some tendons that need cleaning up, if they need to be debrided or something with the arthroscopy, it is like a treatment and it's diagnostic, and that's really our only option for his stifle. So at this stage, we're starting with the MRI because my vet's suggestion was to start with that, because pending the results of that, we can decide whether or not it's worth it to put him through the more invasive thing, which is the arthroscopy, because luckily for our MRIs here, we have a standing MRI that we have access to, so he only needs to be sedated standing and he doesn't need to go under general anesthesia, which can be really risky for horses, and it's way more work and way more invasive. So, my hat. So we're starting with the least invasive procedure, because if the MRI comes back with something that is like a fairly severe injury or like, yeah, an acute problem, it's not necessarily worth it to put him under for such an invasive procedure to check the stifle. So we're going to do the MRI first, and then pending the results of that, he'll continue on to do the arthroscopy. So yeah, the financial aspect of this is pretty difficult, because following Harlow's colic scare, which was like a $3,000 vet bill, this is like another like $3,000 just for the MRI, and then another $3,600 for the arthroscopy, and that's not including the diagnostics we have done. So like financially, it's a huge output, and then also emotionally, it's very, very difficult for me because of what happened with George. The last time I had something with my horses that we couldn't properly diagnose, it ended up being fatal. So I'm having a really hard time with that, because that's kind of how it went with George. And going into that, like, we didn't know what was going on with him either, and it was something that started out not as bad and then ended up being something really severe, and then we ended up having to euthanize him. So with that, like, this is really difficult for me, because I don't know what the outcome's gonna be, and like until we get the results of the MRI, we don't know like what we're actually dealing with, because we have no real leads from the diagnostics that we've done. So it's hard for me because I'm scared because of what happened with George, and I didn't have a good experience with that. And despite how much like emotional effort and like love and veterinary care and financial output we put into George, it didn't take us anywhere, and we lost him anyways. And obviously Milo's kind of been the horse that has been there with me through everything, and losing him would be a lot more difficult, even though losing George was super difficult. So like, I'm trying not to think the worst, but it's really hard not to after what happened with that. And yeah, so I just really want some answers so that we at least know what we're dealing with, and I know what to kind of prepare myself for if it looks like he's gonna need like lengthy rehab, or if it's a chronic issue that is just gonna need to be managed, or if it's something that is absolutely terrible and worse than what we thought it was, and is not something that he can continue going on with, which I'm really hoping it's not. But until we get the MRI, we don't really know. And it just sucks, because like obviously I put my heart and soul into these horses and their care, and he was coming back all right, but there was still some stuff in his behavior that I was noticing that was abnormal, with like how he was standing with that right hind, and then like over the spring it's gotten worse, where he's more sore and there's effusion in the stifle, and then that right front he keeps bruising and he's sore on when he shouldn't be, because of the thickness of his soles and the depth of his soles. Now like he shouldn't be sore walking around on it barefoot, and he's been sore on it kind of on and off, and he was doing really well on it last summer, and then after the winter it's been like a problem, and that could have to do with how wet it's been, but like we don't know. And given the length of time we've spent kind of looking for this and getting him back, dude, I'm not gonna itch your bum like that. Just kidding, I am. I'm gonna do whatever he wants because he's having a hard time. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at and what the plan is. So he's going in for the MRI on June 6th. That was the earliest appointment, that was the earliest appointment that I could get for him. And yeah, so we'll be finding out what's going on then, and then depending on how the MRI goes, he can go in for the stifle surgery after, but like we won't really know what the plan is for that until we do the MRI, because there's no point in putting him through general anesthesia if there's something seriously going on with the foot, that will either need more time to heal and shouldn't probably have an additional injury healing with it, or he shouldn't have to necessarily go under general anesthesia. So we have to kind of see how that goes and play it by ear. And I'm feeling pretty shit because like I'm very good at worrying about things, and until we actually have an answer, that's all I'm going to do is worry about the possibilities that it could be. And worrying about it going down the same type of road as it did with George, because I don't know, like with George, I had like this horrible feeling in my gut that it was just something terrible and we were gonna lose him, and that started early on in treatment, but I kept treating him anyways because I was like, there's no point in like that, like it makes no sense to just euthanize a horse off of a feeling when the vet thinks that it's treatable and it's worth a try. And like I don't necessarily have that horrible gut feeling now, but I do have a lot of anxiety and trauma associated with that whole occurrence, and the fact that this is like the horse of my lifetime who I've had the longest now, who is dealing with these issues, is just really, really hard. And that coupled with like the financial stress and just having to wait and worry for answers is just really, really difficult. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at, and if you guys could keep Milo in your thoughts, that'd be fantastic. Because he needs the well wishes, and I'm just really hoping it's just going to be something that is like fairly easy to fix. Because honestly, like for me, this isn't even about like, oh, like what if it's career ending, or what if he can't jump again? Like quite frankly, I don't give a shit. I just want it to be something that he can be comfortable on and that we can help him with, and that he won't continue to have like major issues with, or if he does, that it's like treatable. Like I just want it to be something treatable and where he can live a happy life and just continue getting to hang out with his friends, even if he's just past or so. And like of course it would be devastating if I could never ride him again, but like that's not even like the hardest part of all of this. So yeah, I'll keep people updated as much as I can, but like right now until June, it's just gonna be kind of waiting around for answers, which is the hard part for me. The other thing we did do is we tested his blood and did like a general health panel for his blood, and then also tested him again for insulin resistance, and there was nothing remarkable at all in his blood results. They came back very normal, so he's not insulin resistant, and there was nothing else that was a red flag or a concern in his blood. So that's good at least, but it's kind of just like along the same lines of like we've done all these diagnostics and haven't been finding anything. And when you don't really have any leads, that's really scary because you don't know what it could be, and it could end up being something really easy, or it could end up being something absolutely terrible. So I have a really hard time being positive after all of the bad experiences that happened with George, and just like I worry enough as it is. I don't need more help worrying, but having to recall like the trauma and like how that started out and how we were like kind of looking and trying to find what was going on with him, only to have it just be something that like absolutely spiraled and eventually took his life, was I don't really want to go through that again, and I don't think I can, especially with like Milo, this particular horse. So yeah, it's hard for me, so please bear with me because I definitely am behind on answering things, and I'm also very stressed. And yeah, it's just shitty. It's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, there's nothing I can do. I've done all I can do right now, but now we just have to wait and see. And then obviously like the financial aspect of this really sucks because he is also not covered by his insurance. Hi, baby. He's not covered by his insurance for either one of these things. So I have to just pay for it all out of pocket. And unfortunately, like when you're trying to start like a business, a lot of my money is currently in product inventory, so I need to really be moving some products so I can get some money back to help him. I also have like a PayPal page open if anyone's interested in donating like anything, even like $1, like you can check that out. And then I have my Patreon if anyone wants to subscribe for behind the scenes training stuff and like tutorials or any training help. There's a bunch of different tiers on the Patreon that you can use to help me. But yeah, I would appreciate if people would just share his stuff, and like even just watching and sharing my YouTube videos so that my ad revenue goes up. All that type of stuff helps. And like yeah, so like he's gonna get the treatment he needs anyways, but it'd be cool if I didn't have to like kill myself trying to make that happen and have to worry about all these expenses with like product and stuff, because the amount of money you have to put into ordering large quantities of product to stock it, even if you know it'll sell, like until it actually all does, you don't see that money back. So yeah, that's something that I really need to do because I don't have any investors. I don't have anyone helping me with my business other than myself. So doing that all alone is really, really hard and yeah, stressful, and I just want to make sure he's okay, and I want to do everything I can to help him. So yeah, if you're interested in helping, please share this video or share like the posts that I made on Facebook or Instagram or any of my YouTube videos. Watch them, get the ad revenue rolling. You can check out my products at shopmilestoneequestrian.com or morequestrian.ca on the Milestone tab. Both of those links are down in my description. My Patreon is also in my description if you're interested in subscribing, and so is the PayPal link if you are interested in donating that way. We'd really appreciate it, because if we have to go all in on this, we're looking at like $6,000 to $8,000 just on like the diagnostics and possible surgery, and that's not including what I just spent for his previous vet bill, which was like very expensive, because we were just trying to rule everything out before we committed to the MRI. And unfortunately we couldn't really rule anything out because we didn't find anything. He has some of the cleanest x-rays I have ever seen. Like, we've not found anything wrong in any of his x-rays as hard as we've looked. He's one of the few horses I've ever seen x-rayed that has absolutely no clinical findings in those x-rays. Including in his feet, which is frustrating because with as many hoof issues as he's had, you would think there'd at least be something that we could find, but no, there's not. So we have to MRI it, and I'm really, really scared that it's just going to come back with something terrible. So yeah, I appreciate everyone's like well wishes and thoughts and kind words. And yeah, just keep him in your thoughts. Anyways, he's fat and luckily not insulin resistant, because I was wondering why he's getting so fat when he's literally just on hay. So anyways, he started having to like fast for little portions of the day or get like less hay. Like, I've been feeding him teff hay mixed with straw, so that it's super, super low sugar. Like, the other hay he was on was already low sugar, but we wanted it even lower and then mixed it with straw so that he's not getting as much nutrition for it. And then I put him out away from his friends with a slow feeder for several hours a day, and then he goes back in with his friends overnight so that he doesn't have to like actually not be able to hang out with his friends, because I feel really mean. And like, even with this, I feel like an asshole, because if it ends up being something terrible, it's like I don't want him spending what could be like the last few weeks, if it is something horrible, away from his friends and in a situation that he doesn't like and he's not happy in, because like when he's out here he yells at me when I come out of the house, and yeah, he's not happy being alone away from his friends. Anyways, check out the links in my bio, and feel free to share any of my stuff, and I'd really appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone who has given support as is. We're going to be planning also like some type of silent auction or a raffle, or something, like whatever people would think is best. If people would prefer to do like raffle tickets for like $2 a ticket or something, then we might raffle off a bunch of prizes that way. Otherwise, we'll just set them up as like an online silent auction, and be doing some other fundraising stuff if anyone's interested. If you don't want to use like the digital forms of fundraising, that would be great. So yeah, you can check those out at the links in the description, and then just keep him in your thoughts and pray for me and him on June 6th, because holy shit, and having to wait that long just worrying is going to suck for me. So please bear with me, because I'm going to be a mess for the next little while. Yeah, so also we'll be having a 10% off sale on a bunch of my products on the morequestrian.ca store, just to try to get some inventory out so that we can help him, and I'll post that link shortly. The code for it will be Milo at checkout for 10% off of your order. And yeah, if you check that out, and if you want to share any of the links, and if you can share the PayPal link, or if you have any suggestions for like fundraising to like kind of help alleviate the stress of this, that'd be fantastic. And like, once we are through this, like, I will give back. I always pay it forward after this stuff, because I know how it feels to be in this position, and like, not everyone has like family they can turn to for help or the same access to like finances as everyone. And like, we have just gotten absolutely sewered these last 2 weeks with vet bills. Like, getting $7,000 worth of vet bills in 1 month is a lot more than many people can manage. And doing it alone is difficult. So it's stressful, and yeah, I appreciate people's help and support. So anyways, thank you to everyone who has loved and watched Milo for the last little while, and I hope that we get good news. So please hope for him, because he's been telling me for a while now that something's not quite right, but there wasn't anything coming up, and he'd also be sound enough after certain times, like with the pro stride and stuff, and with some of the other stuff we tried, where he just kind of would go through stages where he wasn't comfortable. But he's telling me that he's not quite right. So even though we don't have any leads and no real clinical findings yet, like I know there's something that's not quite right. Like there's something going on, and it's just a matter of seeing how severe it is, because it could be so many different things, and I have no idea. So yeah, anyways, thank you for listening to this. If you listen to all of it, please pray for him and me, because I don't know what I would do without this horse, because he's been with me through everything, and this is like one of the worst things ever. Like I wanted to find something at the last vet check just so that we had an explanation. So yeah, please just pray for him. Right, Papa? I'm sorry. He's like, I eat my slow feeder that I hate.